right now at 10:45 on a Sunday morning, or you were able to catch us sometime Sunday afternoon or evening or sometime during the week. Whenever you're able to catch this worship, we're glad that you took some time to worship with us today. Listen, we realized this week that technically this is the 1-year anniversary of us not being in the sanctuary. The last time we were here in the sanctuary was Communion Sunday, second Sunday, March the 8th of 2020. And here we are, March the 7th, a whole full year. If you'd have told me a year ago that we'd be out of the sanctuary for one full year, I called you a liar. I called you a liar. But we have sustained. We're here. We're still a family. God is still blessing us. I'm super encouraged that more people daily are getting vaccinated, and that I believe that is pushing us closer. And so I believe in a couple of months, we're going to be back here together in worship. I don't know when. I'm not saying June, July. I don't know. But what I do know is I believe at some point during the summer, we will be back in here together. So hang on, my brothers and my sisters. Hang on. The time is almost upon us to return. In the meantime, I'm glad that you're here today to hear a word. I'm glad that you're here today to receive a message of ministry through our virtual choir. I'm glad that you are here today because God has something for you. Listen, you don't have to wait. We don't have any special time for offering. And so won't you can go ahead and take a minute to do it right now if you want to virtually. Go to smzbc.org, give online. You can use the Cash App, $SMZBC, Venmo, SMZBC. You can use Zelle, which many of our members are using now. Use giving at smzbc.org, and you can do that on your Zelle app. You can do the text to give. That number's right there in front of you. And for those of you who are listening, if you're not doing anything electronically, then you can always mail it to the church, 14 West Duval Street, Richmond, Virginia, 23220, or you can drop it by. You can drop it by whenever you want to. Secure mailbox on the outside of the church. Those of you who are watching by way of YouTube, thank you. Thank you, YouTube worshipers. It's hundreds of you there every week. Facebook and Twitter, we thank you for joining us this morning. Periscope and website, thank you. For those who are listening, we've had a faithful 40 or so people who listen every Sunday to our worship service. So I'm trying to tell you, I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Listen, won't you go ahead and get ready to join the virtual choir this morning as they bless us. They minister to us. They minister to us. And once they are finished, I'll come back with a word today from Deuteronomy, the 33rd chapter. Won't you join our virtual choir this morning as they minister to us? thank God for our virtual choir blessing us today and for that musical message. And I'm sure that many of you, that word encouraged you. And you are in some serious situations. And God is saying, listen, there are moments when you need to get ready to go to war. The enemy is trying to stop you and stunt your growth and do whatever it is the enemy can do. But we're so glad that our music ministry today blessed our spirits. Won't you turn your attention with me real quickly to 2 verses from the 33rd chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, the Old Testament. And I'm going to read from the Message translation, and these are the words that are recorded. There is none like God, Jeshurun, riding to your rescue through the skies, God's dignity haloed by clouds. The ancient God is home on a foundation of everlasting arms. The ancient God is home on a foundation of everlasting arms. And I'm just going to use the old school title, Leaning on God's Everlasting Arms. Leaning on God's everlasting arms. Moses is describing God's unique design in each trial in Israel as they prepare to occupy the land of promise. Remember, the land of promise to the Hebrews has long been awaited after centuries of bondage and horror and oppression in Egypt. The aged sage Moses survived a countrywide plan to destroy all young male babies during the time of his birth, a time which you will remember that Pharaoh feared the swelling birth rate of these strong Hebrews who he thought, if left to keep multiplying like they would soon outnumber the Egyptians and take over the fertile land of Egypt. Moses, as a baby, was placed afloat in the Nile in a wicker basket covered in tar and pitch to then be discovered by Moses' daughter. Moses, now well advanced in years, having recorded a lifetime of duty and devotion to God, his total body of work, full of God's miraculous grace and mercy, came through a failed and flawed individual. To each tribe now, he describes the personality that makes them unique, along with the promise that God has attached to his posterity. How inspired would you have been to have spoken over your tribe, meaning spoken over your life, that your tribe would never die out? That God promises to help you against all of your enemies, and God would always bless your substance and crush your enemy's head. How encouraged and motivated would you have been to hear God say, when it comes to your life, I promise I will advance your growth and defend you against any and all of your adversaries. Moses is talking, but he is speaking. He's speaking what God has bestowed and what God is promising. These are the kinds of things they are hearing as the aged liberator who has given his whole life to their liberation from Egypt and their arrival to the land of promise is sharing what God is doing through blessing after blessing. Moses, with frail voice and faltering strength, is also fighting through his own disappointment with himself. For a careless moment of leadership oversight, God is now telling him that his own mistakes will mean that he will take Israel to the border of the promised land, but he won't have the privilege to step into it himself. And as Moses is about to wrap up his handling of blessings with word over the tribe of Asher with the promise that God is going to give them cattle and stronghold and how strong these days were going to be upon the earth, he switches subtly in verse 26 and speaks now to the entire collective of tribes of Israel, and his blessing to them is this, verse 26, there is none like God. They've given themselves a nickname that means happy and blessed, Jeshurun. I can understand it, especially when you've been delivered from bondage and escorted, guided, fed, protected by God through the wilderness. God has cleared out the land that God has promised and made your enemies vacate that land, that which will be essentially used to prepare for your arrival. God has shaped you to be strong in the land that God has now planted you in. Verse 26, there is none like God riding to your rescue through his skies, his dignity haloed by the cloud. Verse 27, he says the eternal God is your refuge. Another term for that is God is your dwelling place. and underneath of the everlasting arms, and God will thrust out the enemy before you and say to you, destroy. Now, I'm sure your excitement, like mine, soars on the A clause of the beginning of the 27th verse that simply characterizes as a refuge, as a dwelling place. The image for the Hebrews, some might suggest, is a tent. But overall, it all means the same, that God becomes a place where you can find a rest for your hope and the assurance that no matter where you are, God's got you covered. Moses just prophesied, y'all, to each tribe that they can find shelter in God, meaning that you can rest in God, live secure in its unfolding, and know that it's going to happen. God will protect its unfolding. Why? Because God will always fight to complete what God has promised. He that begun a good work in you will perform it upon completion, which is why the writer says God will be riding the clouds to rescue us toward the fulfillment of God's promise. Now, it also means that you don't just arrive to the promised land without struggle. The blessings that are described in Deuteronomy are for a later delivery, but they are a result of a successful early struggle. You're going to have to fight to walk through and to some of the things that God has promised to us. Everything is not easily delivered, though it is easily pronounced, though God will deliver it. So God does pronounce it, though God does promise it, though God will give it to you. It does not eliminate the need sometimes for us to fight and struggle and scratch and battle to possess the blessing, the battle promised to you. And if it is worth shouting over the promise, it is definitely worth fighting over the promise. God can bring big blessings, but are you ready to put up a big fight? God can bring big blessings to our lives, but then life will always resist the easy handoff of these simple blessings, and we end up having to struggle to possess what was sent by God, intending to make us happy. But I am here to announce this morning that God is committed to fight for us, and the faith response you must offer back to God is, if God is willing to fight for you, then be willing to fight for yourself. God says, and if while you are fighting, you find yourself out there under harm's way, I will be your refuge. I will shelter you from trouble. I will shelter you from danger. Since you are being pursued by your enemy, who without you being sheltered, you would be easy prey, you would be vulnerable to. So fight to live out the promises of God, pursued by an enemy that will always attempt to frustrate you from being blessed and happy in pursuit of your promised land. But know that you are safe in the shelter of a protective God who says, I promised you some things, and not even pressure or problem or struggle or tragedy or calamity, catastrophe, sin, or the devil can stop you from completing it. Now that's verse 26 and the beginning of 27, but that's not what I want to focus on. I want to concentrate on the second part of verse 27. It says, yes, I will be your refuge, and I like that, but then it says, and underneath are everlasting arms. God knows that we need that. It signals me on the one hand as to just how unstable life can be. Instability can grip any of us at any time. They don't care, instabilities. They don't care how old, how young, how rich, how poor, how educated, uneducated. Instability can take a grab and a hold of you. Even if I believe that God is my refuge, I am still potentially fragile because of how unstable life can become for me. How easy it is for us to leave the house in the morning in pursuit of a miracle and go back into the same house managing a mess. How difficult it is to stay upbeat and motivated and focused and aggressive, but yet how hard it is to believe in yourself when you are surrounded by so many people who don't believe in you. The constant temptation that it afforded us by the enemy, the criticism, the people who think they know you have no idea what is going on underneath the skin, the disappointment that comes with trying and failing and trying, the self-doubt that speaks so loud in one ear and the enemy who speaks so loud in the other can make you think that life is extremely unstable. The awareness of being in the right time at the right place, knowing is not a guarantee that I am the right person. Feeling secure doesn't mean I trust every one of my steps, because I know how prone I am to stumble. Pushback makes me feel unstable, makes me feel spiritually, literally, theologically, the way God wants. And God knows this. So you know what God says? God says, I know how unstable you are. And I know how much instability is always brewing inside of you. But I, God, am your shelter. And then more interesting, God makes this revelation. I know life is so shaky that it will cause you to spiral down. But don't you worry today, my brother or my sister, about it, because I am your shelter from above and I am your arms underneath. There is no need here for any type of exegetical forensic work analysis to conclude that God is promising to be above for protection, but God is also promising to be beneath for stability. God is saying, I will be above to help you soar, but I will be beneath to keep you from sinking. So let me be clear and attempt to be concise. No direction you can ever head in, with no decision you can ever make, with no attack you can defend against, will God ever let you sink. No direction you can ever head in, with no decision you can ever make, with no attack you could defend against, will God ever let you sink? And maybe you can't get excited, because I need to tell you this. I didn't say that God won't let you fall. I'm not saying that there won't be moments when you won't plunge. I'm saying that God will prove to you that no matter how close you are, you think, to the bottom, God's arms will always be there to keep you from crashing. Come on today. I wish I had somebody here who will say, yes, Rev, you're talking to me. It's dark and it will get hard, but not as dark as it can get, and not as hard as it can be. And no matter how hard or dark it gets, God is always there to keep me from completely falling apart. Now, you remember this. Hear me over the next couple of years. I know we got a new president and all that, but even then, when things get shaky for us domestically, and that means here in the United States, I want you to remember what I said to you. I want you to walk around even as race relations still become fragile, and as conversations that have overtones of hatred and disrespect become more prevalent, as those of us who feel attacked continue to walk around with eyes in the back of our heads and watching where we go. For those of us who will feel the repercussions from COVID for years to come, I want you to hold on to this. Remember, I told you that not only is God your refuge, but God is also your arms underneath. And when things get bad, just know that we may do some falling, but we will never fall to ultimate sinking, because if God be for us, who can be against us? So whatever idea God has given you, no matter how strange it appears and different from the way other people have done it, I'm here to tell you today, try it, because God won't let you sink. I'm talking to somebody. You can trusting God, because we can always trust in the trustworthiness of God. So when God wants you to put on a God-sized garment and walk by faith and not by sight, I'm telling you today, do it. I'm telling you to forgive people who don't deserve to be forgiven. Stop walking around being weighed down by small and petty issues, because small and petty people won't let you graduate beyond small and petty. The answer you give to the question that the enemy raises when the enemy has the audacity to ask, why do you think you can go for this? Why do you think that you're even able to believe God for this? You stand and boldly declare, I'm carrying a call on my life. I am nurturing a salvation. And I'm in relationship with a God who didn't just save me and leave me. God promised to be with me now and forevermore, and he won't let me go. With no direction you can head in, with no decision you can take, with no attack you can defend against, will God ever let you sink? Instability doesn't have to drain the energy of a child of God's faith. You don't need to doubt the power or promises of your life. A shaky season shouldn't shake your testimony. God help me. A shaky season shouldn't shake your testimony. All of us are going to experience some shaky seasons. But you're still in relationship with God, who says, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. And I'm trying to get somebody this morning to go ahead and release an amen, because you are withholding it, thinking that your condition needs to change before you shout God out. No, your God is the same. And God is the same God holding you in whatever condition you are in right now. So whatever state I'm in, I can learn to be content. I can shout broke and I can shout rich. I can shout healthy and I can shout sick. I can shout employed and I can shout unemployed. I can thank God when I've got enemies, and I can thank God when I don't. Now, what does this do for my faith? This type of thought should give your faith a sense of anchoring. It should ignite your faith confidence. What pushes us through life is not overconfidence in your abilities, but huge faith in God's promises to not let you sink. Now, somebody's personal testimony may be, I've tried stuff believing more so that God wouldn't let me sink than I did in my own competence and my own aptitude. So the question is, how does this change what you think? When it gets shaky in a season of your life, when the foundations of your life, your planning, your preset agendas, your thorough preparation, your unswerving commitment, your control over your own life and space is all met with fierce attack and aggressive antagonism, that you wonder what to do, even wondering even if I've left with anything to stand up on, when how tired I am trumps how desperate I am to arrive to a place of better spirituality. And while you thought you wanted to advance there and go there and grow there and be this and be trusted by that, it is those attacks and that agitation and the constant need to defend and the never-ending shouting that comes from my fears. It all makes me wonder if it is worth it, and how long must I sink? And here is what God has promised to you. God has promised this. God won't let you sink, because underneath whatever is happening in your life are God's everlasting arms. And I'm telling you, God's got some long arms. I tell you, God's got some strong arms. I tell you, God's got some eternal arms. I'm telling you, God's got some big arms. And those arms that God has will keep us from being in a position of being destructed, but God is an indestructible being with a force that I can be tied to. Listen, other than whatever else you build your life on, whatever else you stand your life on, whatever else you prop your life up on, it's going to sink sooner or later. You know why? Because all of that stuff is sinking sand. But at some point, you've got to discover that only when I anchor myself in God am I stable enough to handle the storms of my life. I'm more than halfway done. Notice that these arms have an enduring presence. The writer says these arms are everlasting, 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 everlasting. God won't let you sink now, or God won't let you sink later, because God won't let you sink at all. Why? Because God's arms that are underneath you are everlasting. For the ancient Hebrew, they understood that to mean there is a duration of time that is only known to God. It stretches so far back beyond your beginning. It stretches so far out beyond your ending that you cannot discover the origin of the length of time expectancy for how long the arms of God will undergird your life. It will be further than your history tells you and further than your destiny takes you. As quickly as things change and relationships get ice cold, as they have just a minute ago been boiling hot, the promise that the writer makes here is that God's underneath presence in your life image-like arms spread to catch, carry, and comfort a child of God is forever. Why? Because God is not bound by time. For God, there is no Sunday through Thursday. For God, there is no boundaries. God looks at the totality of your being. That means God is omniscient. God knows our beginning and our ending and everything in between. You and I don't have that privilege. We are sandwiched between a birth date and a death date. Go to the cemetery and look at one of those headstones. There is a name, maybe a nice phrase. There will be a day that they were born, a dash, and the day you die, because that's all we can handle. But when it comes to God, God is before you physically showed up, and God is after you physically depart. Because God imagined you before God decided which room to put you in, so that none of us in here are an accident at our birth, and none of us wherever you are an accident at your death, because we spent our whole life in the hand of an everlasting God, an eternal God, which is why God can tell us to go somewhere and you have no clue where you're going, and trust God to go, because God is already where God told you to go. I'm preaching to somebody. Abraham, go grab your son and go to the mountain I'll show you. They'll sacrifice your boy. Abraham doesn't get the notes of how God is going to work it out. He just shows up on the mountain. Why? Because God already knew that when Abraham got there, he let a ram be caught in the thicket. Do you know that some of us survived some stuff not because you were smart, but because God was already where you already needed to go? Somebody ought to be running around your living room. God is your protector. God is your everlasting to everlasting. God is your enduring presence. God meets you where you are on the way to. As God looks after you on the way to it, God's got your back. There's a story of a man flying. He paid pretty good for the flight instructions. The instructor took him up on the plane, tells him to put the plane into a steep and extended nosedive. The man telling the story said, I obeyed him and I did just that, but I was totally unprepared for what was about to happen next. After a brief time, the engine stalled on me. The plane started plunging out of control, and soon it became evident that the instructor was not going to help me. He said after a few seconds, which seemed like an eternity, my mind began to function again, and I corrected the situation. Immediately, I turned to the instructor and began to vent my fearful frustrations. He said, and then that the person telling the story, and then the instructor said to me, the student, there is no position you can ever put this plane in that as an instructor I can't get you out of. If you want to learn to fly, you got to go up and do it again. The student shared at that moment, it seemed that God was saying to him, remember this, as you serve me, there is no situation you can ever get in that I can't get you out of. And if you trust me, you will be all right. Now, that's something to get excited about. I'm preaching this morning. Some of us know that we've gotten airborne with a whole lot of stuff and nosedived, wondering where God was. And we discovered this wasn't God's first flight. It may have been our first flight, but it wasn't the captain's first flight. And God already had the remedy to every situation, so that no matter what is going on in our lives, all things are going to work together for the good. No space or span of time, no predicament or excruciatingly painful circumstance can erase, erode, eliminate God's presence underneath us. Why? Because those arms aren't temporal. They don't have an expiration date. They never rust out or wear out. Why? Because they are God's everlasting arms. I'm headed home. The arms also have eternal strength. The writer is simply trying to image for us God's power. Now, why is this critical? It's critical because God doesn't have physical arms. God doesn't have a flesh and blood. God isn't a he or she either. I'm talking to somebody. God is a spirit. Rabbi Harold Kushner shares that God is imaged through the lens of the one looking, which means God is whatever you need God to be when you need God to be it. Let me say that again for some of the deep theological folk. God doesn't have flesh and blood. God isn't he or she either. God is spirit. Rabbi Kushner shares that God is imaged through the lenses of the one looking, which means God is whatever you need God to be. God will be a flame of fire if that's what you need. God will be a smooth stone if that's what you need. God will be a rod when a Red Sea needs to split if that's what you need. God can be 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread when the multitude needs it. God can be a boat to get you from one side to the other, which is why God can be present in the temple in the Old Testament, and they be present in an incarnating presence God calls God's Son, and let the Son be born through a virgin who didn't have to be connected to a man physically to send him through the 9-month train of human birthing. God will be whatever we need God to be. Our foreparents used to understand this better. They said God would be a father to the fatherless. God would be a mother to the motherless. God will be a wheel in the middle of a wheel. God will be a bridge over troubled waters. God will be water on dry land. God will be food when you're hungry. God will be shelter from a storm. I'm telling you, God will be what you need God to be. And God is from everlasting to everlasting. And this description that the writer of Deuteronomy puts on God must be understood to image the strength of God's presence undergirding our life. So here's the real principle. No matter how my life spirals in unfortunate descent, God's power is beneath wherever I've descended to. It means we can't go emotionally low enough where you won't find God. This is my word to everybody who thinks life can push you right to the edge until you think your only option is to take your life. Hear me today. I don't know who I'm preaching to, but this is to somebody. There is no place you can descend emotionally to where God can't get under it and bring you back. I'm telling you today, don't you dare quit. No gun to the temple, no needle in the vein. No car off a mountain, don't you give up. Don't you decide that you're going to give yourself back to a relapsed mind, a backslidden state, going back to the world. Let me just go get high. No, not today. Let me go get drunk again. No, not today. Here's the word for you, my brother, and it won't make sense until you can get to the other side of it. But I'm trying to talk to somebody today. Give it one more day. Give it one more day. Give it one more week. Give it one more season. Weeping endured for the night, but joy came in the morning. And sometimes the nights can last, but if you can just be strong enough with God through the night, in the morning, things will get better. Listen, I can look at some of you. I've prayed with some of you. I've sat with some of you. I've Zoomed with some of you who didn't think that you would ever come back from some of the stuff that you made a comeback from. But my God, look at God. And I wish y'all could see some of these folk shouting in their house right now, hitting the chat up right now. Come on, I need you to help me. Hit somebody in the chat and tell them, my God will bring you back. My God will restore my joy. My God will give me a sense of purpose. And I don't know how long it's been, but I'm telling you, God's showing up. Give God one more day. Give God one more week. I don't care how long you've not had a job, how high the bills have become, how emotionally wrecked your heart is, what mistakes you made. You just stay alive one more day. Stay alive one more season. Stay alive one more week. Stay alive one more year. And I'm here to tell you that God can turn your life around. God help me. I wish y'all were here with me in the sanctuary. We be turning this place up right now. But I'm telling you today, don't you quit. Don't you quit. You go back again. You try it again. You do rehab again. You say you're sorry again. Pick up the phone and make a phone call again. Send a text again. Show up to the doorstep again. Try working on that relationship again. But don't you quit. Know that you've got some arms that are underneath you. I'm here and I'm done today. But when it comes to God's everlasting arms, you can feel safe and secure. When it comes to God's everlasting arms, you can know that God will hold you. When it comes to God's everlasting arms, you know that God will bear you up. when it comes to God's everlasting arms, you know that God will keep you up. And listen, in this new church, we don't usually say benedictions like they used to in the old church. And that's part of my fault. I don't even do the benediction here like I should. But I grew up in a church where they would hit a benediction every Sunday. Now we close out in prayer. But those benedictions were some affirming words. And I'm telling you, God ran some benedictions across my spirit recently. May the grace of God and the sweet communion of the Holy Spirit rest, rule, and abide henceforth now in each of your lives, now and forevermore. That's a good one. But when I hear a preacher stand up and say, and now unto him that is able to keep you, God help me, I'm pronouncing a benediction on your life and present you faultless before the throne with exceeding joy. Come on, I don't care how hurt you are today, God can keep you from falling because you serve a God who won't let you sink. Let me try it again. And now unto him, and now unto her who is able. Wait, let me stop here. Ain't God all right? Now unto him who is able to keep us from falling and present us faultless before the throne of grace with exceeding great joy. We can survive this. I don't know who I'm preaching to today, but somebody was ready to throw in the towel. I'm telling you, give God one more day. I know you're ready to turn it loose, but give God until Thursday of this week. I know you're ready to hang up the towel, but let God get through the month of March and April and see what God can do. If God has kept you from falling, you've got to be able to open up your mouth. And I don't know who I'm talking to, but if there is some saints here today, I need to hear you all across the region. Somebody ought to be shouting thank you right now. Somebody ought to be shouting thank you right now. Somebody ought to be shouting thank you right now. The joy that you have is because God kept you from sinking. The joy that you have is because God kept you from sinking. The power that you have is because God kept you from sinking. And the only reason you are in your right mind right now is because God is a keeper. God is able to keep us from falling. God help me. I wish I had a Rudolph McKissick in me this morning. Somebody that'll say, won't he, won't he, won't he, won't he, won't he, won't God do it? Won't God keep on making a way? Won't God dry all your tears? Won't God restore your job? Won't God open up some doors? Won't God make some new ways? Won't God back your enemies up? Won't God prepare a table? Won't God give you some hope? Won't God straighten out your crooked places? Won't God flatten your high mountains? Won't God elevate your deep valleys? Won't God forgive your sins? Won't God heal your sickness? Won't God make your steps straight? Won't God order your steps according? Why in the world you still sitting down? Won't God put food on your table? Won't God help you pay your bills? Won't God help keep your family together? Won't God keep you sane? Won't God keep you in the dark times? Won't God walk you through the storms? Won't God put grace on one side and mercy on the other? Come on, am I talking to anybody? Do we serve a great God? Yes, he is. Do we serve a great God? Yes, he is. Do we serve a great God? Yes, God is. Do you serve a great God? Yes, God is. Do I serve a great God? Yes, God is. God is. God is. I serve a great God. I'm done for I mess around and kill myself up here. Dear God, we thank you for your word. We thank you for allowing us to be able to lean on your everlasting arms. Somebody's down in the dumps. Darkness has penetrated their spirit. The enemy has them isolated and alone. Life has poked and poked and prodded and prodded. Towels are getting ready to be thrown in. But I'm telling you, underneath you. God, you are everlasting. Hear us today. Hear our cry. We need you. God, I'm praying real quickly because there may be a brother, man, or woman who needs to hear this word today. Struggling. Move them if it is your will. This is our prayer in your name. Amen. If this word blessed you today, then I challenge you to be responsive to it. If you need to recommit, then do it. And we were in the sanctuary. I have an altar call right now because I'm feeling it's been a tough season. And I know for some of us, it's been easy to fall off the wagon. Real talk. You used to go to Bible study. You don't even do Bible study no more. You used to do church school. You don't do it no more. You use the complaint that it ain't the same when I ain't in the building. And it ain't the same. But that's a part of being a disciple. This ain't about making you feel good. It's about challenging you so you can do the work. So if you're here today, won't you rededicate, recommit yourself right now? The church is going to open up soon, the building. But you don't need to come back to the building to be serious about your kingdom work. Now I'm talking to those who don't know. You don't have that relationship. I'm telling you, get connected to God. It's the best thing that'll ever happen to you. The best thing. The best thing. The best thing that'll ever happen to you is making that commitment. It'll be a day and a moment that you will remember for the rest of your life. It's me. I need to be saved. And if that's you, just hit us up in the chat. It's me. You throw that hand up. You want to just send a direct message? Do it. Everything has a way of reaching somebody. And if you can't figure it out, then try to email me, pastor@smzbc. Call me, 804-648-7511. And if nothing else fails, you come and see me. But I want to help you get closer to God. We love to have you here as a part of the fellowship here at 6 Mount Zion Baptist Church. I believe it's one of the greatest places on earth to be a part of the kingdom. But we'll send you wherever you want to go. But I don't want you to sign off of this broadcast today and not be right with God. Take advantage of this moment, my brother and my sister. Seriously. Come on. Join the family. Join the kingdom. Join the kingdom. Join the family. We all in this thing together. God help you. I pray that word blessed you. It blessed me today. And I thank you. I thank you for listening. And I thank God for having arms that we can lean on. Arms that we can lean on. Again, we're thankful for your participation. If you missed the opportunity to give earlier, then you can do it now. Give online at the smzbc.org website. Cash App, $SMZBC, Venmo, text to give. It's all right there in front of you. You can always mail 14 West Duval Street, Richmond 23220. You can always drop something by. We've got a secure mailbox. And if you're watching it on a Sunday, somebody's there to receive it right now. Deposit into the work that we are doing. We are a church that does ministry. We're a church that helps folk. We are a church that serve. If you don't believe it, get in your car on a Friday midday and drive past here. You'll see us out handing out groceries, being a blessing to people, giving out clothes. We do what Matthew 25 challenges us to do. So deposit into the work. This building is also old. And right now, we're in the midst of doing some major work. I wish I could show you, but there's some huge holes to the left and to the right. We are doing some work, creating some exit stairs out of here. We're going to get this sanctuary repainted. We're getting new bathrooms. Most of you know, but some of you don't know. For years, over a decade, this church served as the city's homeless overflow shelter. This church, every night when it was 35 degrees and under, we had people sleeping here, sometimes upward to 150, 200 people sleeping downstairs. And you can imagine that after a while, your bathrooms will take a hit. And so we are putting in and doing what we got to do to get new bathrooms here, getting the outside of our building set so that water won't come in and further deteriorate. All of that is happening here at the historic 6 Mount Zion Baptist Church, one of the more historic churches in the United States of America. If you want to sow into this church, it's work. Our founder, John Jasper, started me, the 7th pastor, in 154 years. I'm telling you, it is worthwhile. I pray that our ministry of music blessed us today. We thank God for our music coordinator, Minister Miles, and the creative way in which our music ministry is offering up its virtual choir experience. We're excited about that. Listen, real quickly, join us for prayer this week, Tuesday and Thursday, 7 a.m., area code 804-203-9011. Prayer Tuesday and Thursday. Wednesday, one of the best Bible study series I've been a part of since we've been here, the study of the biblical character Elijah. Elijah is blessing me. It's blessing me. It's blessing me. And I'm telling you, Elijah will bless you. Join us this Wednesday at noon and or 6:30. Noon and or 6:30. We had a great crowd on this past Wednesday. Many of our Mount members jumped over afterwards on Zoom, stayed on Uber conference. Man, last Wednesday encouraged me. Let's keep it up on this Wednesday, noon and 6:30 or noon or 6:30. And then Friday, we'll be here serving. If you need food, come through. We've got a blessing. We're not cooking food, but we're giving out groceries. And so if you need some groceries, stop by. If you got an ID, bring it. Bring your ID with you. And we're serving you on this Friday. And then we'll be back here next Sunday. Listen, before you sign off, don't sign off. I've got a video that I want you to check out. We've had 2 experiences this week. One, our very own pharmacist in the house, the only black person who has their own pharmacy here, founded, and she's a part of our fellowship. Dr. Chantel Brown has been a blessing, has been all over the place on all the news outlets, all of them, 6, 8, and 12. She was on Nightline as a part of a story this past week or week before last that talked about building black wealth through black businesses. But we want you to check out real quickly a clip that Channel 12 did on her and her vaccination efforts. And so, Dr. Brown, shout out to you, my sister. I know this has been a tough season for you, and God is going to bless you. And we thank you for what you're doing for the community. The second part, we were fortunate. You know, God has placed me here to do ministry, but God has also opened up other doors for me to serve our greater community. Some of you know that. I won't get into all of that. But because of that service, God connected me with Reverend Emmanuel Harris, Reverend Emmanuel Chucky Harris, who pastors Jerusalem and Goochland. He's also the president of the Baptist Ministers Conference. Also with Dr. Michael Jones, pastor of the Village of Faith and city council member in the 9th District. We got together, we worked with the Virginia Department of Health, and the Virginia Department of Health committed to a couple thousand doses of the vaccine for us to work with churches of faith and to primarily vaccinate persons of black and brown skin. And so we know disproportionately the minority communities are underserved. There is still some angst about the shot, but they gave us 1 week. We got together 54 churches, I think, 54 faith assemblies, and we got together almost 2,000 people. Truth is, it went over 2,000 because the program went so well that they gave us another 1 or 2 days afterwards. ABC News heard about the effort, and it's the World ABC News. They came and they did a segment that we're going to run in a second, and I want you to check it out. And so I want you to check out Dr. Brown's efforts, and then I want you to check out the faith-based pallet effort. And I want to let you know that we out here working. We're showing the God in us through the service that we are providing. And I'm telling you today, you give God one more day, one more week, one more season. God is not finished with you yet. And I know it's hard. I know you're struggling. I know the last year has taken you to hell and back. But I'm believing that if you can lean on the everlasting arms, God's going to pull you out of it and take you where God wants you to be. Do I have any testimonies? Do I have any testaments? Are there any persons here today who can say, Rare, 5 years ago, when I look back at where I was then and look at where I am now? When I look 2 years ago at where I was then and look at where I am now, God was up to something. Thank you, my brothers and my sisters. Don't sign off. Check out these videos. And then join us for prayer Tuesday. Join us for Bible study Wednesday. Join us for prayer Thursday. Come on, serve with us on Friday or grab some food. And then join us here. Same place, same time, next Sunday. God bless you. We love you.
Well, Dr. Chantel Brown, who's the owner and operator of Hope Pharmacy, has been working with BDH to get the first dose of the vaccine and administer it to people 65 and older. But she's focusing on communities of color. She's offered several clinics, and the most recent will be on Friday of this week.
We need to educate as well as give access and vaccinate. So that we won't leave anyone behind.
Inside Hope Pharmacy at the market at 25th. Dr. Chantel Brown continues to answer calls and plan vaccine clinics for the Churchill community. Hope Pharmacy is providing vaccines for people 65 and older, and Dr. Brown says they are focused on helping people of color get the vaccine.
We are the most vulnerable people of color, and so when I saw what the statistics were, and when you look on the maps, they show all of the different areas. Richmond is always red. So I wanted to make sure that we were purposeful and intentional about getting the community done in Richmond.
Dr. Brown has worked with local churches and offered 4 clinics so far at different senior housing communities. And while she doesn't have exact numbers,
it's in the hundreds. So it's in the hundreds, and I think we're going to try to really get a lot done on Friday, this upcoming Friday, on the list that we have, so that we can work on other lists.
Right now, Hope Pharmacy can only vaccinate those over 65 years old, but Dr. Brown is looking towards expanding that list.
It makes me feel really proud to be a part of it. It can be overwhelming at times, but it's something that has to be done. And so I am taking the initiative. I'm an advocate for this community, making sure that we get everyone vaccinated who wants to be vaccinated.
And it sounds like a lot of people want to be vaccinated. We just heard while that live report was going on that the pharmacy, since our last report at 5, has gotten dozens of phone calls from many of you reaching out about the vaccine. The hope is that people younger than 65 in the next few weeks who have underlying health conditions will be able to get their vaccine through Hope Pharmacy. On your side and live in Churchill, Jasmine Turner, NBC 12.
With hugs and COVID-friendly elbow bumps, Pastors Emmanuel Harris, Tyrone Nelson, and Mike Jones greet congregants in the crowd at the Richmond Raceway. The banter feels like post-Sunday service socializing, but this crowd isn't here to pray. They're here for protection, a dose of the coronavirus vaccine.
I had to read up on it and just to listen until I made up my mind.
Healthcare workers administered roughly 2,000 shots into arms in a single day here, and the diversity of this crowd was all part of the plan.
I asked, could you set aside 2,000 shots for black and brown people?
and let the faith communities be the one that get people out.
We talked to Reverend Tyrone Nelson at the historic 6th Mount Zion Baptist Church in Richmond, which has been empty for almost a year.
Second Sunday in March, 2020 was the last time we were here.
And do you miss it?
Yeah. I mean, it has been one of the most difficult things in my life. I'm desperately in need of some hugs and some handshakes and holding some babies and seeing some of my seniors face to face.
Reverend Nelson sees vaccination as the way out, a way back home to the sanctuary. And so he has been incorporating public service messages in his virtual Sunday services.
If we're going to beat COVID-19, the vaccination is the way to do it.
But there's an issue, vaccine equity. Reverend Nelson is helping to make sure that the black community here receives a fair share of doses. It's a problem across the nation. Black Americans are receiving fewer doses of the vaccine compared to their proportion of the population. CDC data shows of those who have received at least one dose of the vaccine, 64.3% are white and 6.5% black, despite African Americans making up more than 13% of the population. That's why Reverend Nelson helped enlist roughly 50 faith leaders in and around Richmond as part of a pilot program with the Virginia Department of Health. And it all came together in the mass vaccine event at the Richmond Raceway.
I've made calls to pastors. I've made calls to my own members, all of our members here. I personally have called them myself. And I've worked the call center, getting people signed up. I wanted to be a part of every step. You know, I want people to know I'm all in.
In fact, in Virginia, though they have represented 22% of COVID cases and 24% of COVID deaths, black residents account for just 12% of vaccine recipients so far. Black Virginians make up 19% of the population in the state. The Virginia Department of Health is hoping to turn those numbers around.
We use the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index. And that is a tool that the CDC has published for the whole country to really help understand where we should focus resources and times during an emergency.
Digging into specific census districts.
So faith-based organizations in our highest risk areas were asked to be a part of this pilot.
It's a data-driven approach, a public health campaign delivered